Hello, this is a review of 4 music-themed mystery games that you can use your deductive logic to solve. We'll be reviewing Murder of a Musician, the case of Percy de Vere. We'll be looking at a case set in the early 1960s in Suspects. And we'll be looking at a 1990s themed case in Perspectives. Of course, I will be giving my own opinions, but I'm also going to be talking about things about each game that might make it appeal to some, but not others, as well as, of course, things that some may dislike about each of these games. For me, I love mystery games and I love rock and roll, so whenever I see a game that combines both, I'm really excited about the chance to play it. Just last weekend, I was at the Fuji Rock Festival. I used to be in a band myself. We got as far as a couple of gigs at a local hard rock cafe. None of us had to quit our day jobs. All of us are still alive, and one person went missing. What type of games are these? So these two here are very much in the cold case style of investigation game, in that you're given a lot of very realistic materials to assess and come to conclusions about as far as who is guilty. Suspects is very different. Rather than being given sort of realistic case materials, it's more of a card-based game. And you're going to be making a lot of choices about what to look at and when. Compared to Murder of a Musician and Percy, Suspects is going to make you feel a lot more active in hunting down the killer. Perspectives is a different beast altogether. In Perspectives, it's essentially an information sharing game. Each player will have certain cards that other players can't see, and you'll be describing the information on your cards. In this game, it's mostly picture-based. There isn't a lot of text. Perspective, in that sense, is all about teamwork. I think you could play the game as a one player, but it would be a much simpler experience. I feel like Perspectives is much more difficult as you increase the number of players, and I'll get into more detail on that later. Each of these 4 games are essentially one-time only plays, in that once you have finished the game, you will know the details of the mystery, so you won't have an incentive to go back and play it again. You can pass all of these games on to your friends or family members, as nothing will get damaged. How much time are you going to need to put in to solve each of these cases? So, Cryptic Killers, Murder of a Musician, the company system usually tends to be pretty reliable in terms of how long it's going to take you to complete. They recommend setting aside 3.5 hours to complete this. Of course, you could break that up into 1 or 2 nights. The case of Percy de Vere is quite reading heavy, and I would say it's probably fairly similar to Murder of a Musician in terms of its length, so I'd look at 3 to 4 hours for that one. There are 3 cases in this suspect box, and each case takes about 90 minutes to complete. The cases are not connected, so you could easily play one and then put it aside for a few weeks and play the next case. I would say it's a little bit more difficult to play this game in installments. I'll get more into why when we look at the nature of this game. In this big box, there are 3 games and 1 tutorial case. The 3 main games are split into 4 acts each. Each act takes 20 to 30 minutes to play, so you're looking at 80 to 120 minutes. So what is the premise of this mystery case? The drummer of this band, the Dregs, this is their manager. The drummer has died, he's been poisoned, and it's your job to figure out who did it. In the first act, you're going to have a look at different pictures that were taken at the time by some fans that were hanging out with the band on the day of his death. Who was it that gave him the drink which poisoned him? In the second act, you'll be looking at CCTV footage and trying to find out who left an envelope in the band's dressing room. In the third act, you'll be tasked with figuring out what was on the envelope, and then finally in Act 4, you'll have to put everything together and solve the mystery. So what is the premise of this case? So Percy de Vere was found dead. I'm not going to give you all the details. Let's go over a few that you'll come across early into the game. Recently, Percy de Vere had been involved in a lawsuit with a previous bandmate. He was in the process of getting divorced and selling his home. A lot of the people that visited Percy de Vere's home on the day of his death are suspects. The premise of this suspect's case is that the group, the Candy Love, are in the recording studio, and there are a couple of journalists, one's a writer, one's a photographer, there to interview them and take some photos. During this recording session, one of these band members observes the producer being killed. Who did it? The premise of Murder of a Musician is that this musician, the saxophonist Stubby Hackett, died during the recording of his latest EP. The cause of death was poisoning. He was actually poisoned by something which was placed inside his saxophone. And there is a funny little recording outtake where you can listen to his final words as part of the bonus online features for this game. Let's have a look at the materials for Murder of a Musician. It's going to come in a package like this, which you'll open up, and then you can slide this off and you can begin the game. So the games always start with an introduction letter. One of the good things about the Cryptic Killers envelopes is they give you a list of all of the material that should be here. In every case I've played, everything has always been in its right place. They do give you a password to use online if you need to access some documents that you don't have. But as I've said, I've played, I think, 9 of these games now. I've always had all of the documents, so you're probably not going to need that. So you'll open up the envelope and you'll have all these documents. So the most eye-catching thing in here is a record cover. So this case does deliver with a little vinyl EP cover, provides an authentic touch. There is information here that will be used as you make your final decision related to the killer. SNS type information. So when I think of the Cryptic Killers games, one of the things that comes to mind is a sense of vagueness of their evidence. Like this picture here, it's a doorbell camera footage. It's really unclear just from looking at this picture whether the person here is male or female. Are they wearing a wig? So this case does rely on a lot of witness statements. The witness statements do perhaps appear at first glance to be written by hand, although I'm pretty sure, just given how well formatted the writing is, that it's just a font that looks like handwriting. All of the characters have different handwriting, and they also use different colored pens to make things look a bit more realistic. You get things like this, you get this. Why you get this? It's really a bit of a mystery to myself. Seems to be just there to make you scratch your head. There's a nice map of London. Now let's look at some of the materials from this case. Now one thing you'll notice is it's coming in a big box, and if you saw my last game, you'd know that this box is a lot bigger than the actual content of the game, whereas here I've opened the box and it's already like bursting. It's full of stuff. So there's a lot to go through in this case. You'll start the case here by going through all these documents. One thing I didn't mention about Murder of a Musician is Murder of a Musician has 2 stages, and you have to achieve certain objectives in stage 1. You have to eliminate some suspects. So the first stage of the game, you're not going to be able to solve the case. You're simply going to be able to rule out, I think it's 2 people. Percy de Vere's case is broken up into stages, as each envelope is essentially a stage of the case. There aren't tasks related to the case. I think it's more of a way of being able to divide your time. I notice behind me the bass guitar is starting to slip. The bass and the electric guitar going to battle. I know who I've got my money on. The bass is a lot heavier. Biggest usually wins. After you've gone through the envelope, you also have 3, well actually 4 other envelopes, but one envelope is the solution. So there's fingerprint evidence, black book evidence that was found at the crime scene, and letters that were found at the crime scene. And instead of having a fixed order. It's up to you, the player, which one you want to investigate next. One of the things that I really liked about this game is they have a little QR code you can scan, and it will take you to a picture of the crime scene. It's a 360-degree picture, so you can look up, look down, you can have a look around at things. It is interactive, so you can click on things and find out more information about them. In that sense, it reminds me a little bit of Crime Zoom, which is a game series that I really like. It also reminds me a bit of Chronicles of Crime. Some people might be thinking about that. The problem that bothers me about the Chronicles of crime scenes is they're not interactive in the sense of immediate interactivity. You sometimes can look at an object and you could be like, is that jewelry? Is that a toy? And you have to kind of make an assumption. Because it's interactive, you can do things like there is a smartphone in the room and you can listen to the messages.
You have 3 messages. Message 1.
Percy, this is Hugh. I've got the money and I'll be there, like I said, 7:30 p.m. Because it better not be a setup with the press or anything. 7:30, and we're done, right? Okay. I'll see you then.
That really engaged me with this game. I would recommend going to that crime scene right at the beginning of the game and then going back to it at the end and trying to make sure you understand everything that happened, because the game only asks you for the name of whodunit at the end, which is, that in itself I think is quite a simple process, but being able to understand every piece of evidence in that room really means you understood the whole story. I do need to show you some of the additional content you get in this game that's gonna enhance your experience. So one thing that is really good that Tall Tale Mysteries does with each of these games, they give you a murder board. You can put this up on your wall, you can leave it on the table in front of you, and you can take any notes of things that you think are important. There is a map in the center of the case, and you also do get a larger map of the town. One thing I should say about these Tall Tale mystery games is these games are all set in the same town. So one thing I have liked, having played the first 3 games, is you kind of see the same references to the same locations, Jarvis Hotel and so on. And because of that, you begin to feel like you are a local. One of the issues I feel like with some of the standalone mystery cases is you're really trying to get a sense of the town itself. As you know, the town itself is a character that you have to learn about, and it kind of affects your ability to focus on other aspects of the story. Having a series of games set in one location does help you with that feeling of familiarity. Like, okay, you hear the hotel name. Yeah, I know where that is, and I know where this boarding house is, and so on. It's not just that these games are connected by a location. The games have some overlap in characters. However, each game is designed to be played in a standalone format. There is also some additional information here. There is one envelope full of information. It has an instruction not to open until you've interviewed or you've read the interview of one of the characters. So I actually missed this one because I actually thought this was not connected to the main game. There is information in each of these games that connects to a separate mystery that's kind of in the background in each of these cases. Each case does contain some information specifically related to that mystery that will be solvable once each of the 6 games in the series have been released. So far, only 4 games are available, and I think it's been over a year since the last one was released. So I wonder whether they are actually intending to finish the full series. I hope they do. I've enjoyed all 3 of them so far. This is an example of the case file part that is connected to the extra mystery. There is quite a lot of information in this envelope. It does add and perhaps drag out the game a little bit. I feel like this information is something that's probably going to be more important for the bonus mystery that's only going to be available if they produce these 6 games. So according to the company, they rate this game as a hard for difficulty. It certainly is more difficult than The Death of Gideon Love, which they rate as easy. But I felt like The Mystery of Malia Key, which they rate as a medium, is around the same level of difficulty as this case. If you're somebody that just wants to buy hard games, I actually wouldn't recommend this game as, being for you. You'll probably find it's easier than you are hoping for. That's not to say this isn't a good game. This is a very enjoyable game. There's a lot I like about it. Let's have a look at the materials. So Tall Tale Mysteries is a small company. When you have small producers, they sometimes do make some errors that you don't see from big companies. In this case, I was given 3 copies of the same autopsy report. Certainly would make it a lot easier if you played this one in a group with this kind of error in your favor, as things can be passed around much more easily. Another thing you might get with small companies is you can see where they haven't been able to produce evidence in the same way that other companies can. Like typically in a company like Cold Case, they would print something like this on newspaper material rather than just having a shaded grey newspapery looking box and printing it on standard paper. So you get things like hotel registries. There's a lot of information about the house of the victim in here, which was for sale at the time of the murders. This is a big part of the story. You get nice layout, nice clear maps. The game does provide a number of logs. There's hotel logs, there's crime scene logs, call logs, and then you get into the witness information statements. So let's compare those. Let's see how they do things differently. So here is a witness information sheet side by side. This is from the Cryptic Killers game. This is from the Tall Tales mystery game. So Cryptic Killers there, witness information sheet doesn't include any pictures and it doesn't have much extra detail, whereas Tall Tale Mysteries, you're getting kind of a fact sheet about the person. And if I take this off here, you can also see they've included a picture. And then you get the witness information sheet, which is typed. For me, having the picture makes things a little bit easier to follow. You know the saying, it's great to put a face to a name. And I do like that they keep the pictures on the inside rather than having them on the outside. I have noticed the paperclip has left some marks on the paper. It's caused the color to run a little bit in the paper, but I kind of prefer that to having the picture scratched, which does happen to a lot of my unsolved case file games pictures. Another piece of material comparison. The Tall Tale Mysteries game has included a copy of the Wikipedia page for the character here. Looks very realistic. So this paper is used to really tell the backstory of this artist. Of course, there's going to be other information you get from other characters in this game regarding his backstory. Cryptic Killers really excels in its presentation of the backstory of the victim. His name is Stubby Hackett. And we get his story, and it even covers some of his relationships with different characters in the game. Very nicely presented in magazine style. So nice work, Cryptic Killers, on that one. One thing I really like about the presentation of the evidence, it does really meet the sniff test in the sense that this bag here, it does really look like these are legitimate materials that were found at the crime scene. Like, look at how scrunched and untidy they are. I will open it up. We can have a look. So clearly this is very vigorously scrunched, perhaps even by the owner of the company. It's a small company. So they do look like things that you've that have been found at the crime scene. As a comparison, I'll show this. And this is from Body of Evidence, a game I finished recently. And you can see this paper here is marginally crumpled. I didn't notice that this was even a design aspect. I thought, this is just the way it had ended up in my box until it was mentioned in another part of the game that the menu was scrunched up. The bass and the guitar keep conflicting. No wonder my band didn't go well. You got to have harmony between all pieces of the band. So for me, having evidence presented like this really does add to the realism of the game. I think it's one of the most appealing aspects of these cold case style document dump mystery games. So in addition to these letters, in this envelope there are subsequent interviews and things like that that relate to the content of these letters. You also get post-it notes in here. There is also a pen. So pretty much everything you need to play this game is in here except for your brain. You will need to use a computer or a smartphone when you investigate the crime scene, and in order to check your whodunit answer, you will go online. They do have some hints available as well. Whodunit envelope is in here. Once you've answered whodunit correctly, you open this one up and you get a little bit of an epilogue. In my last video, I talked about how in these types of mystery games, you have a lot of suspects. Often the creators of these games will work hard to make sure their victim is as unlikable and killable as possible. One thing that does is it can give you a sense of maybe not caring so much about wanting to find the killer. Finding the killer can become an intellectual challenge without being an emotional one. One thing I really liked about the Cryptic Killers game is, even though there were a lot of reasons that people disliked and had motive to kill Stubby Hackett, the victim, there was still this evidence of a relationship between Stubby and his youngest daughter that humanized him, and there were other things in his life that made him come across as likable. He's portrayed as someone that liked to do a bit of surprise busking in his free time, so he's clearly passionate about the music. The case of Percy de Vere does something a little bit different in that it does provide one character in the game with a redemptive storyline, even though Percy, the main character, the victim himself, is very unlikable. Now let's have a look at the materials you'll be using in Suspects. In each Suspects case, you'll start with something like this. This is the beginning of the story. There is quite a long introduction to read, and you'll also be given a number of questions to answer. So the target of a Suspects game is to answer these questions as quickly as you can. It has a scoring system based on how quickly you are able to find the answers to the questions. This is the way that the game is able to create some aspect of time pressure that you might experience if you were a police detective or a private investigator yourself, trying to get things done quickly. To get 5 points for answering each question, you have to make a guess of the answers after seeing only 25 of the game's 50 or so cards. In my experience, what I found was I got to about 20 cards, and then I realized, like, one of the questions here, I haven't come across any information at all. So I need to go to other places to get some information in order to be able to answer that part of this problem. What did I mean when I said go somewhere to find out more information? This game does come with this map, and each location on the map relates to the number of a card within this deck. So in order to explore this area, I would pull out the card and read the information on that card. I can also seek out particular people. So this is the group featured in this game, and each member has a number beside their name, as does the engineer. I can choose who I want to talk to, I can choose where to go, and when I get to the places or talk to the people, I'm often given follow-up options. You can ask them A, you can ask them B. you can investigate this, you can open that. At every stage of the game, you have lots to choose from. Let's have a look at some of the cards. Here is an example of the front of the card, and you turn the card, you read the information, and you can see the questions below. There are also other cards that look like this. So this is something related to a location. Here is the recording studio, and you can see there are some options for things that you might want to explore further. By the end of the game, you are going to see every card, and you will basically be at a situation where there is no more information left. In each of the games I'm reviewing, you are going to have this sense of having seen everything there is to see by the end of the game. There's one thing that this game does very cleverly, in that it enables you to connect two cards, and that gives you opportunities to find other cards or select other cards to get more information. So in this case, we have a contract, and you can see here there's a number, and here there's a number. If the two numbers match, when you put the cards side by side, you can then go to that card to reveal how this person answered when he was presented with this contract. Okay, that's a really cool thing. Another little thing you might not have picked up on, there is this little mark here, okay? So we can check whether this person is the person that left this footprint, okay? Do these line up? No, they do not line up. So he did not put this footprint here, okay? There will be someone you come across in the game whose line is going to connect with this one, and then we'll have the option to ask him about it. Tell us about why this footprint is here. Let's have a look at the materials for perspective. So one of the things you'll notice is you get a very, ooh, it's a bit of a mysterious sound. It's not my belly, it's not somewhere else. One of the things you'll notice is you get a very large box. This box does play a role in the tutorial, so I'm not going to complain that the box is so much larger than the game itself. In this box, you get 3 cases. The one we're going to do is the middle one, or the one we're going to have a sneak peek at. And each case is divided into 4 acts, okay? Act 1, 12 cards. Act 2, 12 cards. Act 3, 12 cards, okay? Act 4, no cards. You're just going to reuse all 36 cards, although in really only a few of these cards are going to be important. So it's more of a case of which cards are not going to be connected, and let's focus in on the ones that are going to be connected in order to solve the final part of this mystery. The good thing about this system is, for me, it made things very easy in that I was able to play these games in fairly small time windows. There are clear sort of beginning and start points to each case. We'll have a look at some of the artwork here. This is a picture from the first case, the first act, I should have said. And this is a picture from the second act. The second act is a case where you're looking at the CCTV footage that was recorded at a band's rehearsal in front of its crew and some friends. Here is an example of an image from the third act. I'm not going to show you too many of the cards. Just glancing at the cards isn't going to be an issue, but if you see a lot of them together, you're going to realize how certain things connect. So what do I like and what do I dislike about this perspectives case? Overall, I didn't really enjoy this perspectives case that much compared to the other case in the series, which the first one was set in a museum. I thought that one was a much more interesting case. I found that the storyline here was a little bit thin, a little bit strange in the order of the way it was presented. So, as I said, the first case, you have to find out who gave him the poison, who gave him the drink that took his life. And you find out who gave him this drink. That person's name basically doesn't appear in the rest of the game until the epilogue. We never get an explanation of how it was that this person came to give him this drink. It's never gone into, and for me, it really ruins, you know, what makes a poisoning game so good. The good thing about poisoning games is who had the opportunity to do it. They don't have to be there at the moment the gunshot was heard. It's less important for them to have an alibi. Or if they do have an alibi, it can be a little bit more nuanced. This game really messes that aspect up. This is the first game I've played involving a poisoning where they don't go into the methodology of how the person was killed. All you come up with at the end is, we have a clear motive, and that's all. We don't have the mechanics of putting things together. For me, that made this one really dissatisfying and disappointing when I got to the end of the story. It really did feel like it was very thin. One thing I might recommend for this Perspectives game in the future is try and mix things up a bit. In each of these cases in the game, you're getting 36 cards divided into 4 acts with 12 cards in each of the first 3 acts. The first case I played seemed to really deliver on that premise very well, in that almost every card did have some information that seemed to be of importance. This was much less so in this game. I would recommend in the future have some cases that have a smaller number of cards and some cases that have a larger number of cards. The tutorial case in this box was short and it was fun. It was, I think, more interesting than this second longer case. So I did mention in my previous video on the MMC mystery series, which does have one of the creators, Dave Neal, is also involved in this company's games. There is sometimes an issue of narrative flow, okay? So like I said with the first act, we know who gave them the poison. So what happens in the second act? Do we go and interview them? Do we go and find out more about this person? No, we don't. We are told a different person. Oh, there was an envelope left in the dressing room a day earlier. Who put the envelope there? That's the task. So it's really a dramatic shift in tone. The third stage of the game throws in a new twist to the plot. The nature of being in a famous rock group means that certain pieces of information are just public knowledge. Let's imagine you watched a documentary on the Foo Fighters, and right near the end of the documentary, suddenly they revealed Dave Grohl used to be a drummer in Nirvana. And that was like their big surprise moment that this documentary had been building up to. You get something similar here where they're giving you a piece of information that would be so clearly knowable by hundreds of thousands of people as a big twist. So for me, that aspect was really disappointing. I think because I have experience in playing and learning guitar, it was a bit more obvious where this game was headed for its final act. But for me, it just felt too easy. I'd basically figured out the fourth act as a guess just by chatting with the person I was playing with about his own cards. I could say, hey, I'm guessing you're going to have something like this in one of your pictures. For me, this game so far feels like it's a bit of a throwaway case in a game with 3 cases. I haven't played the third case yet, so I'm still a little bit on the fence as to whether I like this Perspectives game. I do really like the mechanic of giving people the task of having to communicate something that's in front of them without having to show the picture. I do like that sort of guess who aspect of the game. The 2-player version of this game was too simple. I got to the first stage and I said, okay, I haven't seen your cards yet, but I think you've got a card that has a schedule. I think you've got a card that tells us when he had drinks. I think you've got a card that tells us how long after he had the drink that he died. And I think it's going to be, well, I'm not going to say that part because that is definitely going to be a spoiler. I had a similar experience with the third act. It really felt like we could just fast forward the explanation of each card. We could just jump to the questions. The way I played this game personally, a co-worker and I, we played in a bit of downtime. We played the first act Then I gave the first act to another coworker who just worked on it by herself. Then we came together as three to do the second act. And the second act, we really got stuck. I found that as a three-person game, it seemed like it was much more challenging. It seemed like we really had to brute force this game and go through picture by picture and write everything out, and so that we could understand who went where and when. We ran out of time to finish, and then the next time I finished it off, it was just me and the original partner, so back to a two-person game. So we split up the cards belonging to the other member. I kind of figured out pretty quickly, okay, this is going to be the key to answering this. If you're playing this one with a large group, it's going to be a very challenging game. If you're playing with a group of two, it's not going to be so challenging. So maybe if you are a beginner, you might have a better experience with this game just because you'll be able to get through it. I did have an issue with the way one of the cards in the first act was depicted in terms of the answer stage. I felt like the card did not show what it was said to be showing. Actually, I will show you that card. It'll be a bit of a spoiler, so you could skip to the next section if you like. So this is the card I had an issue with. Is the manager on the left giving the drink to the guy on the right? Is this a picture of the manager giving somebody a drink? For me, it's too vague, and part of the issue is that the eyeline for the drummer, the guy with the red hair, his eyeline is matching the manager's eyeline, whereas if you're being handed a drink, your eyeline would tend to like fall to the hand of the person that's giving you a drink. So for me, this isn't a picture of somebody giving a drink. I think the game's maybe trying to catch you out on this one. I think this case is suitable for younger players. This game is recommended for 12 years and up. So I think a teenager that's had a few guitar lessons and doesn't have that much experience with mystery games may enjoy the experience of this one. For me, as I said, I felt the story was just too thin. The narrative flow of the activities to me really felt off. I think if you also like description activities, there's maybe a lot to talk about in the second act, in that you're having to describe people. So maybe if you have an interest in fashion, or you just want to build your vocabulary related to fashion, the second activity might be a bit of fun for you. I wouldn't recommend this second case to people that have had a lot of experience with mystery games and are interested in either a strong story or a challenging game that's really gonna test their limits. Suspects is recommended for ages 10 and up. I was a little bit surprised when I played the game to see the direction some of these stories went. It did actually seem to me that the types of issues that were covered at times were not suitable, or perhaps not that interesting for people aged 10. I think a lot of 10-year-old boys might not be interested in the later cases from this game, but this one I think is one that they would be into. Obviously the presentation with the artwork on the front, and then you turn the card, you get a little bit of a story. I think it's a lot more child friendly than the very text heavy witness statements I showed you from the earlier games. As far as this particular case goes, I didn't enjoy this case so much. I found the writing to be a little dull. I don't know whether it was the nature of the solution that kind of made the writing lack a sense of conflict amongst the different members of the group. One of the interesting things about the suspects' cases is there are 3 or 4 writers, but this game was written by 2. This one was written by Guillaume Montiag and Sebastian Duverger-Nadelic. The other cases here are by different writers. The other cases in the set are written by Fabien Clavel, a French writer who has also published other novels and as well as games, and also Paul Halter, a writer known for the impossible type murders, people dying in locked rooms and so on. I thought the other games in this set were of a very high quality, and they were of a higher quality than this. It's recommended to play this game first because it's considered beginner level in terms of difficulty. If you're worried on hearing that this is going to be too easy, I would actually say it's not that easy unless you go through and make a timeline. If you put everything into a timeline, I think the feeling of the time is captured very well from the types of artwork. We saw those opening images earlier, and the fashion itself and things like that are very good. One of the only issues I think for this game is some people may feel like on first impressions the game is too childlike. If you feel like there are people in the group that might have that feeling, I would say jump to the second case in the game or the third case. Those are much more gripping and a lot more adult. One of the things that Suspects does in order to stop you from being able to solve the game immediately is it gives you certain challenges. For example, you might not be able to see in a certain area if you don't have a torch with you. And if you're able to find a torch in the course of the game, then you can visit these areas. They did add something in this stage that did make the game feel very artificial. After you've found one torch, you then need to find like a second torch symbol on one of the cards in order to go to another area. They felt they needed to do something like this because they wanted to delay a certain twist within the game. But just that aspect of like, okay, you need two torches in order to visit this area and find out more about it. It felt so artificial and fake to me that it kind of took me out of the game experience. In the other cases within this box, they have some similar tools to delay you getting information, but it all feels very natural, especially in the third case. There's a rather brilliant way of resolving a particular issue in accessing more information. The thing I really like about the Suspects cases is the level of depth you get when you get to the solutions to the game. Just have a look at the solution to the game. You get so much depth. So there's all of the information I'm going to see when I get to the solution of the game. So I don't have any issues relating to how to check, like if I made a mistake in the game, which cards I can visit is very clearly indicated here. So if you do have a problem at the end of the game, this is going to help you out. There's no specific hint system within the Suspects game. Sometimes these characters are like saying things in a certain way to kind of highlight that this is a hint. Can be perhaps considered a weak point of the game in that it's making things less challenging for higher level players by telling them things that they don't necessarily need pointed out to them. Perspectives doesn't really have a hint system except when it comes to information sharing. In each stage of Perspectives as a group, you take one of the 12 cards and reveal it to all members of the group. You can reveal extra cards, which is basically, you know, its own hint system within itself, and you can reveal extra cards at the cost of 1 point. An issue is there are only like 4 points in each stage. There's only 4 questions. So if you have to reveal a card just to answer that question, you're kind of at a zero-sum game in that, okay, I've shared this card, we answered 1 question, our score isn't improved. I feel like the Perspective scoring system could be refined for future games. I think especially for larger groups, the larger the group, I think the lower the penalty should be. Murder of a Musician has a great hint system. If you go to the website, which is written on the inside of this folder, you'll have a number of areas you can choose. And the good thing about their hints is they're very finely graded. It feels like they're just nudging you in the right direction. What you'll probably do when you first go to the hints, there'll be about 6 hints for one section. You might find the first 3, you're like, yeah, I already know this, but I still couldn't figure it out. And you get to hint 4, that's it, okay, I'll come back, I'll try again, okay, I got it. And if you really don't get it, maybe hint 5, hint 6, they're really going to hammer it out for you. Okay, I'm grabbing you by the ears and this is how you do it. They're really just giving it to you as opposed to just nudging you in the right direction. I didn't actually use the online hints for the Percy de Vere case, so I'm not going to review that. When I played this one, before I pressed whodunit, I just wanted to make sure that the person I had as the killer was the killer. I looked at 2 hints and I was like, okay, I got this. The hint system isn't as in-depth as what you'd get with a Cryptic Killers game, but I think the complexity of the case itself is lower, so you don't need that level of a hint system, and it seemed to work fine for me. So who would like the case of Percy de Vere? If you're someone that likes a case involving a lot of reading, you're certainly going to enjoy this one. There's a lot of material to go through. If the story is one of the most important things for you, you're really going to enjoy this case. It has a nice story. There is a redemptive aspect to the storyline involving one of the characters, which for me was quite satisfying. The 360-degree look at the crime scene and being able to interact with those objects for me was very satisfying. They do actually list everything in that crime scene in one of the pieces of evidence, but having that visual experience for me was so much more valuable. I was able to gain so much more detail rather than just reading a list. Okay, there's something under the sofa, there's something on a table. Who might have an issue with this game? Some people who are interested in a case that's very difficult might be disappointed that this is advertised as being a hard case when it's more of an intermediate level case. If you dislike having to read a lot, you're probably not going to enjoy this case as much. Maybe consider the composition of the group if you play it with a group carefully. For example, a group with children may find it a little bit boring just because of the level of reading. The picture of the crime scene is certainly going to engage them, but I wonder if they will have the staying power to go through all the witness documents, the case logs, and so on. Another issue with this company's cases, because it's just a small company, there are some issues regarding typos in their games. There are a few typos throughout the case. The most significant one, when you get to the fingerprint envelope and they're going over the fingerprint results of different objects in the room, there's one object where it's kind of left blank. It says this fingerprint belongs to, and then it's finished. I think that the writer had just left it blank and forgot to come back and finish things off once she figured out the rest of the story. It doesn't make the game unplayable. That's important to know, because later you'll see a police interview and the police will say to this person that your fingerprint was on this object. You know whether you're someone that's willing to put up with this kind of issue or not. The suspects' cases, there were an occasional hiccup in the language here and there, but again, very minor. Cryptic Killers doesn't really have any of those types of typo problems. They're one of the highest selling companies in this genre, and all of their games to me feel like they have been extensively reviewed and tested. I think in playing about 9 of these games, I've only spotted 1 or 2 errors. Who would like Cryptic Killers, Murder of a Musician? This game does have a lot of reading because of the witness statements. If you're someone interested in a mystery which does have a large reading element, you're going to enjoy this one. I think this would be a good game to have a second person to play with. I played this solo. It would have been helpful to me to maybe have someone that was also enthusiastic about this to sit beside me and go through some theories. Like the case of Percy de Vere, I think also if you're someone that isn't that interested in a reading heavy case, this isn't for you. Go to Perspectives, go to Suspects, and play that instead, if you choose to play at all. Another issue that I have with the Cryptic Killers Murder of a Musician game is, one thing I don't think they're very good at is helping you with playing the game. So this is an example from, oh, it's been hidden. The bass is doing the moving. It's supposed to be the fingers doing the walking when it comes to bass. Okay, this game here. This game included a timeline. I actually personally found it quite enjoyable to go through all of the interviews and just put everything into a timeline, and that really helped make certain details of the case quite clear. Providing that for players would be something that Cryptic Killers could do to take their games to the next level, because I think the quality of the writing is strong, the quality of the materials is very good, but sometimes as a player, I feel like I could be given some things that would be of use to me in solving the game. That could enhance my experience. I loved the murder board from Percy de Vere. I love these aspects to games, but I'm not getting them from the Cryptic Killers games, and I'd love to get them. And I am going to get more Cryptic Killers games because they usually deliver. The thing I really liked about Murder of a Musician is you're dealing with an intelligent killer. You're dealing with a killer who has put some thought into what they want to do. They've put some thought into how they're going to get away with it. The other thing I like about this game is I think I'm a bit of a sucker for poisoning games. Games involving poisoning so much more interesting than a game involving, a gunshot death or a stabbing. Because when you're dealing with a stabbing, you can kind of rule out certain people. This guy's simply not up to the task, and so on. Poisoning can be a little bit more subtle. It can even things out when it comes to physical strength and so on. That is one of the reasons I was so disappointed with the Perspectives poisoning case. They ruined all of the potential that existed in having a great time solving a poisoning mystery. Overall, my number one personal pick for music-themed mystery games, Cryptic Killers, Murder of a Musician. Number two, not far behind, a very strong case from Tall Tales Mysteries, the case of Percy de Vere. I will be looking at the Mystery of Malia Key when I get round to doing a missing persons mystery game. This is actually my favorite case of the 3 Tall Tale mystery cases I've played so far. Coming in at third, quite a distance behind the other 2, is the Candy Love case from Suspects. I will say though that there are 2 other excellent cases in this Suspects box. Finally, in 4th place and a clear last for me was this Perspectives case called The Dregs. I did enjoy the other case. I haven't played the 3rd game, so maybe I'm going to come out in the future and say Perspectives is pretty good with 1 bad case. Or maybe I'm going to say it's a bit hit and miss. There's 1 good case and the other ones are a little bit smelly. Please let me know what you think. Have you played some other music-themed mystery game? Maybe there's one that I haven't played and I don't know about it. Maybe I'd want to play it, so do leave a comment. Thank you for watching. The next video might be a look at mystery games set in the world of art.